Welcome to the Village Well podcast, brought to you by Village Well Books and Coffee in downtown Culver City. Welcome back to the Village Well podcast. I'm Jennifer Casper, your host.
And I'm Josh Stratton Carlson, your producer.
It's been a busy week here at Village Well.
Yes, it has.
We were both here last week when the car crash happened.
Yeah, a bit of some insane news for you, but an inebriated driver took a left turn very hard and crashed through.
Did he take it hard or did he take it loose?
I guess, why not both? But,
yeah, he missed the turn. He was going too fast to make the turn, basically.
Yeah. And
slammed into the store.
And just slammed into the glass. Miraculously, there were no injuries.
No injuries, even seemingly to him. They did take him away on a stretcher, but he didn't seem like he was injured.
He was maybe a concussion, but he was walking and
he seemed like he was in shock to me.
Yeah, it was just it was crazy. I mean, the glass somehow didn't shatter. Everyone, luckily, it was after hours, so we were having our book club, and everyone was on the other side of the store,
except for you.
Except for me, I was at the register.
Yeah,
and he just came barreling towards me into the store, and just by some miracle, we're all fine.
That miracle is called the bike rack outside.
Yes,
there was a big iron bike rack, and he had to plow through it. And that slowed him down enough that
cemented
he didn't
into the ground.
Yeah. It's really solid. It bent it all the way down. He went over it and he hit the window. He knocked the glass out of its frame, but he did not. The glass wasn't broken, and they just reinstalled it today.
Yep. So we're shaken, but fine.
Super shaken.
And just very, very glad that everyone's okay. And we appreciate everyone reaching out. So folks have been
this
reaching
community
out to
is
the
the best.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and we've got also really grateful to our landlord that has great connections and sent a contractor over that night to board us up. So I didn't get home till 12:30, but the place was boarded up and I didn't have to worry about having an opening into the store overnight.
Yeah.
So, and that same contractor came back today and fixed the glass.
Yep. And now we're back to normal. So just a week
sort
later.
of. I texted two city council members today to say, how quickly can you get a new bike rack in there? Because
totally.
Knowing that can happen. And the landlord told me also it's not the first time that a car has hit this space. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's all glass. I mean, not that means cars should hit it, but it makes you feel a little, it makes you feel vulnerable. I mean, it's just like floor to ceiling glass there.
Totally.
Yeah. So that was great. So that was our original book club meeting when that happened. And then last month's book club meeting is the one that is recapped on the episode that we're about to play. And that was a really great conversation. We read You Dreamed of Empires by Álvaro Enrique. It's a translation and a really great book. We all just decided that we loved it, even though it was hard to read. So he kind of tries to generate this kind of hallucinogenic, fantastical, dreamlike state. And he's
and he succeeds.
And he succeeds, yes. And once you figure that out and you go with it, it's a lot easier to appreciate the humor and all the details because there's historical detail in there that is correct, even if the story we don't know if it happened or not. But it was a meeting of Cortez and Moctezuma. So Cortez, the Spanish conquistador, was arriving in Mexico City to conquer it, and Moctezuma doesn't fight him off because he's really intrigued by the horses, and he wants the horses. At least that's what the author is hypothesizing here was why it went down that way. It's a real chapter of Mexican history, and it's a hypothetical story of how it went down.
I was saying this before we started recording. Once you understand that the book is trying to disorient you, I think it's a lot easier to get through it because that's kind of the mood the author wants you to be in as he's kind of switching between perspectives without tipping you off to that. There's dream sequences. There's lots of magic mushroom.
Magic mushroom.
Yeah.
They said magic mushrooms, magic cactus, and magic tomatoes.
Right. Who knew?
We didn't know about the magic tomatoes before. But I did like the book. It was funny. And I learned about Mexican history. I'm always trying to soak up as much about Mexico as I can. Mexico, it's right here. It's so easy to get to. You've got language and culture and art and history and really fascinating stories.
Totally.
that tell us about ourselves too.
Absolutely. Well, we hope you enjoy.
Hi, welcome back to the Village Well podcast. My name is Tobi, and today I'm here with Fern and Nick.
Hello.
So we're here to talk about this month's book club book, You Dreamed of Empires by Álvaro Enrigue, translated by Natasha Wimmer. We had a great discussion last week about this book, and we're going to see if we can recap some of it today and bring back some of the great arguments and points that were made last week. You Dreamed of Empires is a bit of a curveball of a book. This is a book about the first encounter between Conquistador Hernán Cortés and his soldiers and the Aztec Emperor Moctezuma. The plot is set in the Aztec palace as the conquistadors are waiting for an audience with the emperor. It's entirely set within a single day and structured into 4 parts. One is before the nap, then Moctezuma's nap, Cortez's dream, and after the nap. It's a book about translators. The translators between cultures and languages play a prominent role here. And it also addresses translation itself in a note to the translator or note to the English-speaking audience that opens the book. The way we started out the book club last week is I'm interested in literature in translation. And this is a novel that is also itself very interested in translation. And so the question was, what is the last book that we may have read that was in translation, not in English? Do you remember your responses to that?
I do.
Yeah, go ahead.
The current book I'm reading that's in translation is Suetonius's Lives of the Caesars. Tom Holland just did a translation of it that came out recently, and I'm going through that right now.
Very nice.
Yeah.
I'm reading The Cat Who Saved Books. It's a Japanese book, and it was bought on a whim at a bookstore. I looked at it and I was like, that's a cool title. I love these things. I'm going to buy it. So that was like, cool, A Cat Who Saves Books. I've just started it, so I don't have anything intelligent to say about it just yet.
Nice, fantastic. Literary translation has changed quite a bit. I think there used to be this figure of the 3% that was being said about U.S. readers tend to read 3% of their readings are translated. Everything else is originally in English, which is a very, very low number. I think this is the number for fiction. And it seems to me like that may have been changing a bit. Like there's definitely more stuff coming out in translation. And Natasha Wimmer, the translator of this novel, is somebody who is one of the most renowned translators from Spanish to English now. She's translated Roberto Bolaño's 2 big novels, The Savage Detectives and 2666. More recently, she also translated Sudden Death, Álvaro Enrigue's previous novel. And then something that I hope to read soon is by Nona Fernandez, a Chilean author, something called The Twilight Zone. And so for me, Natasha Wimmer is somebody who whenever I see she has a new novel in translation or she's translated a new novel, I'm interested in it. I will check her out because I think once you start reading a little bit in translated fiction, you'll get to know, you'll find your favorite translators where you don't only trust their translations, but you also kind of trust their choices and projects to take on. And this novel, interestingly, starts out with a note to English language readers that is addressed directly to the translator. It starts out with Dearest Natasha and then talks about some of the names. And then even in the acknowledgements, Natasha Wimmer shows up as a reader of early readers of the script, so that we kind of have this collaboration, like this more collaborative relationship between the author and the translator here, where it's not only here's the script, do what you will, but there is a ongoing correspondence and an ongoing kind of collaborative practice happening.
And I loved how in the note to the translator, he talked about how his choices were so specific about why he used certain spellings. And he was like, it's not meant to be historically accurate. I just like the sound of it. And I was like, I love that.
Yes. So when we read fiction and translation, how does the reading experience differ from reading fiction that's in the original?
When I read something that's in translation, I tend to be kind of on alert for some of the changes in cultural nuance or specific verbiage. In this book in particular, one of the decisions the translator made was to use, the author made, was to use some modern colloquialisms in some of the internal dialogue of the characters. And I tend to notice that more when I'm reading something that I know it's been translated. And so it kind of can create moments sometimes that take me out because I'm maybe looking for it too much. And so it kind of becomes this push and pull where I'm looking for the similarities and the differences a little bit more than I might just reading a book that was originally written in English, where I maybe take it for granted or don't, not on the lookout for some of those differences.
That's really interesting because I don't think I read them differently, but even in books written in English, if there's a word I don't know, I might look it up if it's a really weird word I've never seen before, or I might just keep reading and just know what it means in context. And I guess in translated works where they leave in the word in the original language, it's a similar thing where if it makes sense in the context, I'll just keep reading, and if it doesn't, I might go and flip back to the back or the front to see if they talk about that choice. Mm-hmm. But the actual act of if I pick up a book that's translated and I pick a book in English, I don't really go into it a different way.
I really like that the being put on alert by the translation, and I think we have now translations today tend to do more of leaving things in the original, there's certain terminology that is hard to translate. This is called foreignization. It's this old spectrum is between foreignization, domestication, and translation, where it used to be much more the case that translators tried very hard to make themselves invisible and make the translation as invisible as possible by domesticating, by kind of turning everything into something that is in the target text for the target language that is familiar, that is already comfortable. And these moments where you're being put on alert and may be sent to Wikipedia or to the dictionary, I think those translations become more common now. Mm. And here, this note to the translator, or this note to the English language audience, does a lot of this. A lot of it works as a warning, kind of to be put on alert. This is something we talked a lot about in book club, how we were struggling with names.
Yes.
Because most characters here have at least two names, sometimes 2 or 3, and they're in various pre-Columbian languages, plus in Spanish, and then sometimes in English too, I guess. Enrigue talks about that he chose to leave these in the original, and he even changed these from how they commonly used in Spanish, in Mexican Spanish today, because he just liked the sounds better a certain way. And so it's followed by what he calls a list of characters with correct spellings, names, nicknames, and roles for reference. And so I, for one, made ample use of this list and went back again and again to make sure I'm not losing track of the characters, who is who. There's people with, Cuitlahuac, Cuauhtémoc, Atutoshli, Moctezuma, Xocoyotzin. It's a very jarring reading experience if you're not used to these kinds of terms.
Oh, and it's a very different language than I think even many Americans or English readers would be familiar with. It's not Latin, mm-hmm. So it's very foreign, and especially with the X's in there and having to know how to read those or not know how to read those, it can be I was given how difficult some of the names are, and the X's in particular stood out to me, and I had a lot of sympathy for many of the readers of the club who found that as one of the challenges of getting into this book.
Yes, let's talk about those challenges, and some of the responses we got when we first talked about how we responded to the book. What was your experience, Nick, and what did you think, Fern?
The way I thought of my experience with this book, the image that came into my mind was when you take a book to the beach and you're sitting out in the sun, and at a certain point in the experience, you've been out there for too long, you realize you've not internalized anything of the last 5 to 10 pages, and you've just been reading on autopilot, and you're but you're so you're comfortable and you're tired and you're hot, and so you just kind of go with it. And I heard that from some of the other participants of the club too, that there was a certain point where they just had to kind of give in to the experience and be a little lost and a little confused, and which I think works to a certain extent for what the book was trying to achieve, but isn't maybe the most pleasant of reading experiences.
It's so funny because once I heard that so many people were giving in to the confusion, I was like, oh, I did not get that cue at all. I just thought that I was like, just needed to muscle because it wasn't my type of book. And so I muscled so hard through this book. Like I forced myself to read it to the point that I think I've read the first 5 pages or so, like the first chapter at least 3 to 4 times between the audiobook and the physical book. Because when I first opened it to that letter from the translator, I was like, oh, this is really cool. And I was like, I'm going to need the audiobook to listen to how all these names are pronounced, because I am fascinated by that. And I know I'm going to get caught up on that when I'm reading it physically with my eyes. So I got the audiobook. And then very quickly I was like, this is not going to work. Like I love the narrator's voice and accent, but like I would tune out almost instantly and then have to repeat it again and again. And finally I was like, all right, no, I'm back to the physical book. So I just went back and forth until I just was like, all right, physical book, we're going to stick this. And I think because there was that translator's note and because there's a list of names, I thought I was supposed to understand it. To me, those are cues of like a historically based novel where you're supposed to keep track of things.
Yes.
So that's what I tried to do. And it was much easier because I read an ebook. And once I got to the middle and was like, wait, I can just take a picture of those initial names pages. Once I did that and had my phone next to the book, the ebook, then it was much easier because I could just immediately reference it instead of having to like go to page blah, blah, blah. So once I did that, it was easier. But I think by that point, I was already frustrated enough that I was in the muscling point. And by the end of it, I was so just mad that if I were someone who threw books, I would have thrown the book. And in a way that is what made me come to book club and look up at reviews of this book, because I was like, I do not understand. How is this prize winning anything? Why? Why?
So first of all, I think it's brilliant to snap a picture of that, the page with the characters. That's great. And I think you were not the only one who struggled with the audiobook in particular. And I think in this case, the audiobook is kind of a trap because you cannot easily pause and go back a page or go back to that page with the list of characters. I gotta say, I read it in a hurry, and I think that it helped me.
Yeah.
And then the shortness of chapters also helped me really get through it. And it's once you start, giving into it, I think the humor comes out more. Like there's really hilarious bits, and with these, the book makes such great fun of the conquistadores,
Yeah.
and at the same time also. It's been called like an anti-colonial fantasy in a way, right? An historical rewriting or reimagining of this kind of point of contact or point of encounter between cultures. But the Aztec Empire doesn't come away, unscathed either. Like it's very critical. It describes the cruelty of human sacrifices a lot. There's a lot of cruelty in these pages in general, like the atrocities committed by the conquistadores. We don't really witness them on the narrative level, but we read about, I think, Cortez remembering one of these massacres they committed, and then just the opening scene is the Spaniards sitting at a dinner table, and this one protagonist is trying to eat the food and not throw up in disgust, because there's the priests who are the ones doing the human sacrifice sitting on the table wearing coats made of human flesh, and I think
there's a smell of blood in the air.
There's a smell of blood and rotten human flesh. It's pretty gruesome.
I can't remember if it's at that point or a different point, but they're enjoying chocolate for the first time, and they're unable to enjoy it because of these surroundings.
Let's talk about some of the characters. I think the most interesting character may just be Malinali, which is let's read all the names. So this is the translator. So this is historically the figure who's, I think, most well known as La Malinche. And she's kind of this, the other goes also by Malinali, Marina, Tenepal, Maria del Mar. I think there's a bunch more. She's also known in Mexico as La Chingada, which means the fucked one, the raped one. And so she was Hernan Cortez's, depending how you look at it, his lover, his translator, or his slave. And she's become in Mexican mythology this kind of ur-mother of all mestizos, like the first. And with Hernan Cortez, they had a son together, Martin, and he is considered to be the first mestizo, the first mixed race Mexican. This is dialectic view of her, where she's on the one hand vilified as a traitor to her own indigenous culture by selling out to the conquistadores and like kind of opening the land, to the Spaniards. And more, this is something that happened especially with the founding of the modern Mexican state since the early 20th century. And then later on, there were feminists, especially feminist kind of revisionist. She's become reclaimed by feminists as being, this mother figure for all Mexicans. The blame for selling out a culture has been kind of dampened or reconsidered. And so today there's this dialectic about how she's viewed, either as a traitor or as a feminist, early feminist, proto-feminist hero in a way, or heroine.
And also, did she have a choice? Like, if you're a traitor, it implies that you've got so much of a choice. I'm like, I don't think she had a choice here.
She absolutely didn't. And I can't remember if the book goes into this, but she was a slave already. And
she was a Mayan princess who was enslaved by some Mayans. And then
I can't remember. I don't know if it was Mayans or one of the neighboring feuding city-states.
And then as the Spaniards came, she was passed on as an enslaved person to Cortez. So there's very little, in terms of agency. But there's also very little that the archive, very little concrete stuff about her in the historical archive. So for the most part, her history is, distorted, imagined, invented throughout the centuries. And so here, how does she, what do you make of Malinali here? How does she come across?
She was a strong character to me because even though she was going through being essentially a concubine, I guess, she was able to, when we got to look into her thoughts, she was very much her own strong woman. Despite her situation. So I felt like she, as a translator especially, had quite a bit of control as far as the narrative goes. Both translators could sort of decide whether or not they were going to translate what was actually being said. And in the very first scene, they totally don't, which I thought was pretty hilarious and a way of sort of protecting themselves as well.
I mean, the translators are kind of the ones who keep up, the polite appearances, like the decorum of the palace, because you have these two. On the one hand, you have Moctezuma, who's hiding away. Oh, we should mention he is basically spending the entire book just tripping on mushrooms, being jaded and arrogant and not really caring, or maybe thinking about possibly sacrificing these Spaniards. And on the other hand, you have Cortez, who's just as arrogant and kind of uninterested in real dialogue and committing one, you would say diplomatic blunder after the next. And they're all kind of, just saved by the translators who pick and choose how and what they translate and what they don't translate and what they kind of embellish in order to, facilitate this encounter.
I guess they're actually interpreters, right? Because it's like they're interpreting between cultures in real time, which I think must be so hard. And they both, I love that both of these such strong historical figures just look like kind of lost, bumbling idiots in the book. I mean, they've got plans and stuff, but they are both just kind of, they're both tripping the whole time, most of the time.
Absolutely. I also love so Moctezuma is is on magic mushrooms almost the entire time. And the priests who provide the, drugs to him are starting to worry and, this is not good. You should really not take so much, especially before, an important diplomatic meeting. And he doesn't really care. But the book also doesn't, it's a very demystifying view, I think, of psilocybin and like psychoactive drugs. It's not like he has big enlightened, moments of enlightenment or epiphanies. He's just kind of addled and hangs out, has trouble getting out of bed, and at the same time, Cortez, I thought it's hilarious what a bumbling idiot he is, but it's also the book seems to say that he doesn't really have to. He inhabits this kind of power of this colonial force, and he can let force, or he thinks he can let force speak, and he doesn't really have to engage with these kind of like communicating between cultures. That's something that he kind of outsources to the translators. Okay, so I was going to bring up the figure of Atotoshli, which I hope I'm saying right, who is the sister and wife of Moctezuma, because it's kind of this interesting, I think, pairing with, opposite Malinali, right? These are the two main female protagonists. What do you think about her role?
I think her role is super interesting because she's towing this weird line between having power, so she has some kind of role in keeping this empire together, but at the same time she's not the powerful one. She kind of is subservient and needs to say everything in a way that won't get her executed, which is kind of terrifying place to be in.
Which also I found interesting, that the threat of being executed is kind of ubiquitous. There's all these other like higher ups in the hierarchy who just basically walk around in fear, in continuous fear of possibly being executed on a whim, for disobeying, for like not being not kissing enough ass, basically. Yeah, then Atotoshli also has this encounter with Malinali at some point. We may read this as kind of the most feminist scene in the novel, where they kind of have an understanding, and this is kind of the clearest scene, I think, of intercultural understanding here that we see, where Malinali, as already kind of an interpreter between cultures, just talks straight with Atotoshli, and they go, I think, check out the horses. Is there something else that bothered you about the book?
To continue on my whole thing about how it's confusing, there was one specific section where I got very irritated because there would be a paragraph that would start in a chapter, and then midway you find out who the subject of the character is. Then the next paragraph would start, go on something else, and midway you realize you're with a different character now. And it kept happening within that one chapter. And I was like, at least have some, be respectful to the reader. Put a little tilde in between the paragraphs so we know we're changing people. So this is before I realized I was supposed to be confused the whole time. And for the purpose of confusing the reader, this is very effective to not indicate that there's a perspective shift. But for someone who hasn't given in to the flow of it yet, I was very frustrated at the lack of basic book layout. I'm a graphic designer. I have things like this.
The book is structured around a nap, right? We are in the course of a single day, and so the first part of the book is called Before the Nap. Then we have Moctezuma's nap, and then I think we have Cortez's dream, and then After the Nap. So that's, as a basic structure, it's already kind of weird.
I did struggle with the structure at times. And coming to this book with kind of the excitement I had given recently going through the history, there were some points of personal frustration where, how does this connect and how does this relate, and it being kind of dreamlike. And I definitely got lost at a few points. It took me a while to really internalize, this is just one day. I was having some difficulty making sense of that until further in the book. So I had a lot of sympathy for people who, came to the club with no knowledge of even who these characters were, what this event was. That said, I do appreciate some of the takes the author had. Moctezuma was reportedly very soft-spoken and very religious. So the idea that he's kind of this disengaged, drug-addled emperor who everyone's afraid of because he won't cut off their head. He'll send them up the temple to have their heart taken out, I suppose. But I appreciated it. I thought it was a nice. Synthesis of kind of what we know about him and what the author was trying to do. But yeah, sorry, it's a bit of a tangent. Structurally, I struggled with the book.
Yeah, I think this is when I most often went to the list of characters to keep protagonists apart. But the switching of point of view, I think, accelerates towards the end, and then at some point you kind of get into it and you get it. Oh, every time there's a paragraph break, it's probably a different point of view.
Yes.
All right, our producer Josh is signaling for us to open up the spoilers, start the spoiling, and so now we get to talk about the ending. Before we talk about the ending, though, I want to talk about the horses.
We should talk about the horses.
Why is there a horse on the cover of this book?
That's why Moctezuma allowed these foreigners to get as far as they did, because he wants their horses.
Yeah, I think the history is the horse died out well before the Aztec Empire, in the Americas, well before the Aztec Empire came to be. And they had turkeys, which I mentioned, and some other no pack animals. Yeah. Deer would have been the closest thing, who were never domesticated. So the idea of the horse, of being this kind of exotic, powerful, you could use it as a pack animal. It's a ton of meat, already domesticated, as being as valuable as the gold that Cortez was looking for, maybe the foil to that. I thought, and then the author had a lot of fun with that kind of dynamic.
It seems like he's been sending his scouts and spies to spy on the Spaniards since they since they landed, and they come back to report to him. And from the beginning, it seems like he's most interested in the horses. He doesn't really care about the Spaniards at all. And the novel, I think, it does a really good job of pointing out why, painting this or characterizing this as him just seeing the next technology. It's just a technology upgrade for their civilization to get these horses. And also it turns out that there is some more recent research that corroborates this theory, right? Or maybe where Enrique got this theory from is based on real historical research, that there really was a thing about the horses, that Moctezuma was, really obsessed with the horses.
Cool.
Right, but what else? So what happens at the end? So the conquistadors are, lost trapped in the palace. It's not quite clear to what extent they're trapped or just waiting around for this audience. And finally, they do meet, and Hernan Cortez gets to face Emperor Moctezuma. And what happens next?
I can't remember if this is exactly what happens next, but there's a kind of a mistranslation moment, or how you read that, where they hear the word Greek, and they think it's this other word for I think it was Zleek or Schleek, as it was written in the book. And there's all this confusion. The Spaniards think they know what Greek is, and that it has some kind of religious, I don't know, proof of God or what have you, or that they're, I can't remember specifically, but I thought it was so interesting that they are both mishearing. The Spaniards are hearing Greek, and Moctezuma is either playing with them or mishearing Zleek, and they're having this whole conversation about this language, and saying that they can speak together in it, and it's all very strange.
And they're both totally high at this point.
Yes,
I thought it was. Yeah, I didn't. This was one of the things that I just went with without thinking about too much. Is this Greek pun, this apparent pun, but Moctezuma offers Cortez some psychedelic drugs. I think it seems to be peyote, maybe. And so they're basically tripping together. And at that point, while high, Moctezuma asks him, "Do you speak? Oh, you speak Greek? Then we won't need the translators anymore. We can just communicate with no translation, since we're all on the same wavelength now." Is I think the idea. Then I think there's a short chapter where Cortez has a dream, or has basically a vision, and the vision is kind of stutter frame fast forward through the entirety of colonial history until the present moment. And then he wakes up from that. And the next thing that happens is Moctezuma's son-in-law, who's been missing the whole time, who's been on the loose, nobody knows where he was, manifests from his camouflage in the wall and kind of descends down and rips Cortez's
face off,
head
essentially.
off, spine out.
Yeah. Like splits his head in two.
It's very
by
video
the mouth.
gamey. Yeah.
And that's the end of Cortez.
And the book.
And the book.
Just
people were upset that all these other apparent loose ends, just are never really brought to a conclusion because Cortez is dead.
I noted that there's a lot of Molly Nolly story. She kind of fades into the background. There are a lot of loose ends. I guess that didn't strike me as much as the fourth wall breaking, which I always struggle with, especially when there's an author self-insert. I have a difficult time with that, even if it's, I think, pretty well done in this book. And
this we should mention also, this is a bit earlier. This is also when Moctezuma, I think, is peeking on mushrooms, and he looks into a bowl of blood and sees in it Álvaro Enrigue sitting in COVID-era New York writing this novel. That's the classic fourth wall breaker. Right. I think even and he's listening to T-Rex. He's all of a sudden Moctezuma is listening to a T-Rex song.
And the description of how he's dancing to it was really adorable.
Yes. Sorry, but I was interrupting.
No. I just wanted to touch on that, and then just on Cortez's end. I can appreciate wanting to kind of tell an anti-colonial story. I can appreciate wanting to punish Cortez. He was a very bad guy. He was acting illegally, at the time even. But yeah, it was just such a Mortal Kombat ending to him that I was just kind of like, okay, it didn't, I don't know, move me or I didn't have much of a reaction to it than like, oh God, okay. It was more or less where I landed with that.
By that point, I was just trying to get to the end of the book. So when that happened, I was like, wild, and then ended, and I was like, what? I was like, but what I really wanted was the Malinali and the Princess collusion story to turn into something that would be Cortez's end. That's one reason why, even though there's something like morbidly delightful about how Cortez died, I still wanted something more narratively interesting as far as the women get together, and that is alternate history, and that is how Cortez gets taken down from the inside. But it wasn't, and it just ended, and I was so mad, as we've established.
What did the book club do to you as somebody who was, mad at the book, who kind of wanted to throw it at the wall? Is there something redeeming or something eye-opening that you heard people mention in the book club? Did this kind of enhance your understanding or your appreciation for the novel in some way?
Yeah, by the end, I came into the book club saying I hated this. By the end of book club, I was like, I still hate it, but now I appreciate it.
I was very comforted by the book club. This is, as I said, was my first time attending. I struggled with the book, even given some kind of historical context. I just thought there was a lot of quality conversation and kind of honest appraisal of the book and people's reaction to it that I found comforting.
Yeah, I think somebody mentioned that after talking about it and kind of establishing, like sharing our struggles with it, but also like now in the group discussion, establishing some basic understandings, that it would be fun to reread it because you will kind of give in to the humor a lot more, and you'll see and find more details.
Yeah.
One of the things that blew my mind is somebody said. So somebody pointed out the scene where Moctezuma is apparently, again, just, high and disoriented, and he's being seen by somebody sees him talk to the wall. Right. That is just confusing. You think, oh yeah, he's lost, just like in some kind of hallucination. And turns out that he was probably talking to the assassin who jumps out of the wall later on to murder Cortez, right? And so I think the book probably has a lot of those little kind of Easter eggs and little hints.
I definitely walked away with a similar reaction. I don't reread stuff much, but I think I would get a lot out of rereading this. And specific to that observation that someone made, there's a line I think it's in the first chapter where the Spaniards are talking about how the walls have eyes, and it's probably this assassin. So yeah, I do think this would be a much more enjoyable reread.
Yeah, it was the woman sitting next to me who pointed that out, and I was like, you are brilliant. I love hearing you talk about this book. And it was fun because she also made the comparison with how the bumbling of these two leaders was very much akin to just modern day, where so many of us don't know what we're doing, or like the people in leadership and power, whether, I don't know, government, or like in an organization, so many leaders just are kind of flying by the seat of their pants and making it up as they go. And so she found a lot of comfort and hilarity in how these two major leaders in the past were also sort of bumbling around. So I actually did start to try reading it. I actually did try to read it again. And it was so surprising to me how quickly I got to the second chapter, given how long it took me the first 4 times around. I tried to like keep restarting it, and I was like, oh wow, this is a short book. It didn't feel like it. I didn't get much farther because I think I'd like more space between the first reading and later. And I've got so many books about to expire through my library that, there are other books calling my name. But I would be open to rereading this one, even though I also don't usually reread books.
Just thinking about it since the book club, and also I'm not sure if somebody brought this up in the discussion, but the way that this is kind of an anti-colonial revenge, fantasy. Like the novel has I think the blurb says something about like a Tarantino-esque twist ending, and so the way this is reimagined is may think of Django, right? Or even of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where at the end they're kind of reimagining the Manson murders, right? Where this revenge fantasy where like the Manson murderers are getting blown up by flamethrowers and whatnot.
Right.
But here, this short chapter that's Cortez's dream, that is the actual colonial history as it transpired. The idea that we are in that, right? The idea that we actually live in that history, and at any moment he's going to snap out of it, and this conquistador is going to get his throat ripped out. Is kind of it's kind of interesting. It is satisfying to me in a way. It's less of a throwaway punch than just let's just imagine this is what happened, and then who knows what happens after he's killed. But the idea of like this inversion of reality, of like that we may actually be inside the stream, I think also works together with these fourth wall breaking instances where the author kind of shows up, right? So it's like, I don't know, it gave me some food for thought for sure.
I think that's really interesting. The kind of inversion that we may be in the reality, I'm not sure how I feel about. But this is definitely one of those butterfly moments in kind of history where I think it'd be easy to make an argument that, eventually the Europeans would have colonized either way. But we don't know that. And it was I think it was a few years from beginning to end, from first contact of, the Spaniards and the end of the empire. And had that not happened, what could be so dramatically different? I think that's an interesting point.
Well, Fern and Nick, thank you so much for coming on.
So great to be here.
I really enjoyed it. It was my first time with the book club, and I loved it. And thanks for your moderation.
Well, thank you.
If you'd like more information from us, check out the show notes or send us an email at podcast@villagewell.com. You can always order the books mentioned through our website. This episode of the Village Well podcast is brought to you by Village Well Books and Coffee. It was produced and edited by Josh Stretton Carlson, and our theme music is from Noah Vickland. See you next week, and keep reading.